Uh, my name is Michał Łęcicki. I am a software engineer from Visuality, Polish software agency, and today I want to tell you about Ruby. And before we start, I want to tell you a short story. So, about a year ago, CTO of our company, Paweł, came to us, Ruby developers, and said, guys, do you know that there is official Ruby certification exam? And maybe you want to give it a try, maybe you want to pass it, since we are Ruby on Rails agency. Sure, why not? Company will cover the costs of the exam. So I was in, of course, and other developers also were into this idea. And we started to meet each other once a week and study the example questions for the Ruby certification exam. At the beginning, we thought, how hard can it be? We have 5, 7, 10 years of experience writing commercial Ruby on Rails applications. But soon we realized we don't know everything. Some questions were problematic. Some questions were tricky to us. And that's exactly the point. We would spend years writing in Ruby on Rails, but we don't explore the language itself. We don't know all the methods, all the edge cases. And to us, Rails developers, some areas of Ruby are pretty undiscovered. So in this talk, I want to give you this spark or a motivation to explore Ruby language beyond the surface, beyond what we are used to see in Rails. So yeah, let's rediscover some gems in Ruby. And speaking of gems, of course you probably know that a gem is some piece of Ruby code that you can include into your project and use functionalities it provides, classes, modules. But did you know that we have different types of gems? And let's see what they are. So first of all, when you install Ruby on your machine, we have access to standard library. This is the core of Ruby language. All functionalities that are really tightly bounded to the Ruby core. This means when you install it on your machine, you have access to those tools and you cannot update nor remove them. When you want to use different versions of those libraries, you would need to reinstall Ruby version and have this updated library there. Example, math or object or gem. But we have also default gems. Some parts of Ruby library were extracted from the core and moved as gems. But they are installed on our machine when we install Ruby. And again, we cannot remove them, even though they are gems. If we really try, we can update them. And usually they are maintained by Ruby core. Examples, benchmark library or did you mean library. And in general, in Ruby, you can see the direction of taking things out of Ruby core into default gems. Because it's much more convenient to have some functionalities in separate places. It's much more convenient to update them independently from Ruby version that is updated once a year. But we have also third group. We have bundled gems, which are even more independent from Ruby, but again, this is something you get when you install Ruby on your machine. But you have more control over it. Those bundled gems are usually maintained not only by people from Ruby core, but also by independent developers, and you can freely update or remove them from your machine. And of course, we have also some native extensions. In the previous talk, we heard about them, so let's just keep in mind, this is some code that needs to be compiled on your machine to make some Ruby libraries work. Yes, different types. So I thought it would be a good idea to give you some quiz. Maybe you use Ruby every day, right? So let's try to find out what types of those libraries are. So we are using JSON library. A question to you: who thinks that this is a default library? Okay, just few people, and you are right. All right, testing framework, also very popular, and we are all using it. Who thinks this is a bundled library, bundled gem? Don't be shy, please raise your hands if you believe this is a bundled gem. Okay, few people, and you are right. The library we use when we want to generate UIDs, random UIDs in Ruby, is it a bundled library or a default one? Who thinks this is a default one? Okay, more of you, and you are right. Another testing library, Minitest. Who thinks this is a default library? Oh, no one thinks, and you are right, because it's a bundled gem. And the last one, AirSpec. Who thinks this is a bundled gem? Few people. Cool. Not, you are wrong. This is just a great gem, but it does not come with Ruby. If you want to use AirSpec, you need to include it in a gem file or install it by yourself on your machine. Ruby is not shipped with AirSpec. I highly recommend you to check out standardgems.org page, which lists all Ruby versions along with default and bundled gems versions. This is super helpful if you are doing an upgrade of Ruby for your project and you want to check not only changes inside Ruby core, but also changes in the libraries, because those libraries change really often. Going to another topic. In Ruby, it's a very flexible language, and we have many ways to define a multi-line string. Multi-line string, I mean the string that results in more than just one line in the final output. So we can declare it in the code using double quotes, or we can concatenate strings using a new line character at the end of string, or we can use string literal to create that. But in Ruby, we have also here documents. And this is a special syntax that is exactly used for creating multi-line strings. How does it work? Well, first we have double less than signs, and then we have a starting tag. After that, we can put anything in the content of the multi-line string, but we need to close with the same tag as with starting tag. This is a very convenient syntax when we want to, for example, put SQL queries in our code or some bash scripts. And as Ruby or Ruby on Rails developers, for sure you saw that, but there are some gimmicks. And maybe you know that as starting or ending tag, you can use any word. What matters is capital letters here. We can use Baltic. And when we talk about strings, you probably ask about string interpolation. How does it work with here documents? It is possible to have a control over if we want to enable or disable string interpolation in here documents. If you want to disable it, you need to put a starting tag in the single quotes. Then, as you can see, the variable name is not interpolated. On the other hand, if you want to enable string interpolation, we are using double quotes. But the default behavior, if you omit the quotes and just use starting tag, enables you string interpolation. So usually you just use this one, and if you want to really disable the interpolation, you put single quotes. There are some edge cases, though. For example, if you want to format the multi-line string nicely in your code, you would like, sometimes you need to indent the content of the string. Now it's very easy to read. But if you do that, you can see that in the final output, those indentation signs are present. So some white spaces before our strings. This might be problematic. And in Ruby, we have a solution for that. There is a so-called squiggly here doc, which uses tilde. This means all the white spaces before the content of the multi-line strings will be stripped. But remember, the closing tag must not be intended. If you have indentation before it, there will be syntax error. But Ruby is flexible. You can also do that. We have another operator. We can use double less than signs. Sometimes people call it shovel operator. And then we use dash. In this case, Ruby will ignore indentation and will not strip indentation out of the content, but also will not care about indentation of the closing tag. So to summarize here documents, remember closing and starting tag needs to match. String interpolation is enabled by default. If you want to strip, get rid of indentation, use tilde. And if you want to have the closing tag intended, you can use dash. And now my favorite topic, but a question to you. How many of you have ever heard about Ruby refinements? Okay, about half of the audience. And how many of you have used it in your project? Fewer, but still, nice. So, if you, well, it's a very popular use case that in Ruby, and especially in Ruby on Rails, we are using some functions or methods and we are not quite happy about them. They work, but we want to a little customize their behavior. And Ruby, for example, we have a date class, and when we use toS method, there is a string version of the date returned, but in the format of ISO 8601. So imagine in our project or in one of the modules in our project, we want to a little tweak this behavior and we want to return a different string from this date. Maybe we want a weekday, the month name, and we want to make it comma separated. In Ruby, we have many ways to achieve this behavior. And the very first one that we as Rails developers usually do is monkey patching. Because Ruby is so flexible that enables any developer to reopen any class that was previously defined and overwrite methods inside it. In other languages, such as in Python or in JavaScript, it's also possible, but it's not so easy. And there are many languages when this is not possible at all. In Ruby it is, and it is very simple. So we just create a new file, we create a class date, and we overwrite toS method as we want. And when we call toS method on the date object, we have updated behavior. For sure, everyone has done it at least once. But, well, one of the features of monkey patching is the fact that the method is updated everywhere in the global namespace. And usually this is what we want to do, but sometimes we don't want to do that. Sometimes we might get some weird bugs in other places in our application because we wanted just to override the behavior in some scope. And now it's overridden everywhere. So we have alternative solutions. We can use inheritance. Another mechanism that is present in Ruby and in other object-oriented languages, when we just create a subclass that inherits from the base class, and inside the subclass we are overriding some method. But there is one drawback or a feature. We need to use our newly created class, friendly date in this case, not an original date in our code base. And sometimes this might not be an option, because if we don't have a control over the full code base, we cannot update it to use our newly created class. For example, if we want to update some method that comes from the gem. So it's not applicable everywhere. But we have another solution, which is Ruby Refinements. And you can think about it as a middle ground between monkey patching and inheritance. Because again, we are overriding some behavior of the method that was defined somewhere else. But using refinements, we are doing it a little differently. So first of all, we need to create a module. Let's call it refinements, but the name is up to you. And inside we call a method called refine. After that, we put the class which we are refining, and we update the method inside the block. This means method 2s will have this custom behavior, but only in the scope of the module refinements. So the obvious implication of that fact is, if we want to have the custom behavior, we need to include refinements module. In all places in our app where we expect the behavior to be customized, we explicitly require the module refinements. And we are doing that using another method called using, not include or extend, using. And from the perspective of a developer who just joined the project and reads this code for the first time, it's very obvious that there is something unusual going on. When I read the code of report generator, I see there is refinements module added. So I automatically want to explore it and see what it does. So the fact that 2s method run on the date object is customized is not surprising to me. And with monkey patching, we are often surprised by some unexpected behavior, because you monkey patch in one place and it results in updates in all places in the code base. So to sum up, Ruby refinements, you override the method in one place in a specific module, and then in all places you need to include it to make the update happen. Well, again, I would say there is a drawback that this approach is much less known, and if in Rails project I would see this, probably I would be confused, or other developers in my team would be confused. And with monkey patching, it's not an issue. But for me, it's much more elegant, and it's much more expressive and much more readable for developers. And of course, it's much more complex. You can refine instance methods and you can refine class methods. But there are some things you cannot refine. You cannot refine constants or class variables. And if you ever mix Ruby refinements with monkey patching, you may have trouble, because when you monkey patch a class that was refined, usually the refined version is just voided. I highly recommend you reading the article about Ruby refinements. At the end of my presentation, there will be links. And there is even Ruby gem that lists some refined methods and refined versions of methods from the Ruby. Another topic, which is variables. For sure, we know we have different types of variables: local, instance, class variables, constants, but we also have global variables. Probably we don't use them very often. Well, you declare global variables with $, and global variables are accessible again, everywhere in your code space, which is dangerous because it means you can read them, but you can also update them. I'm not using global variables very often, but what is worth to mention is Ruby gives you some special global variables that are accessible to you automatically on some occasions. For example, we have $! To read the latest error message, or $@ to find a location of error. We have also global variables for the results of regexps, or some global variables to see the current process, interpreter process ID, for example. So we could do something like this. We can log the error which was just raised. Of course, this syntax might be confusing for developers, and usually it's used on when you want to debug something very quickly, or you write some Ruby script, or you just want to see what process ID you have. Another thing I want to mention is ensure block. Probably you know this keyword, ensure. It makes sure that when your program crashes, when something goes wrong, the code that is inside this block will be executed no matter what. It's super helpful if you want to release some resources, close a file, etc. But be aware that if you use ensure block, it does not automatically return value. So if you have a method that is expected to return something, and you want to prepare it for the case that something can go wrong, and you put ensure block, well, you might be surprised that even if in this case, always run returns nil. So this is one of the rare occasions when we really need to use a keyword return. Without it, ensure block just is executed but returns nil value. And speaking of keywords, ensure is one of the examples of Ruby keywords. When you started your journey with Ruby, this is one of the topics you learned. So what are the Ruby keywords, special words that are part of the language? They are so special that they are treated differently than other words in Ruby, which means you cannot declare variables or methods or classes using those words. And this is a great occasion for another quiz. Because for sure you are familiar with Ruby keywords. So let's see if we remember them. So who thinks using is a Ruby keyword? Okay, you are wrong. It's used to include refinement module, and it's not a keyword, it's a method on module. So begin. Who thinks this is a Ruby keyword? Okay, you are a little shy, but yes, this is a Ruby keyword. Now, more tricky one. Who believes this is a Ruby keyword? Just few of you? No, this is another method. Yes, it's not obvious. And private. Well, yeah, we use it very often, but who thinks this is not a keyword? Okay, few of you. No, yes. So, well, if you raised the hand, you were right. This is another method. And self. Who believes this is a Ruby keyword? Okay, most of you, and you are right. This is a reserved keyword. And the last one, try. Who thinks this is Ruby keyword? Okay, few of you, and you are wrong. And more than that, we don't have try in Ruby. We we have try, well, in Rails, and we can run try on hash, for example, as a method, but in Ruby itself, we don't have try. Okay, and I have also some random stuff. So a group of cool methods which I learned about when preparing to Ruby certification exam. And yeah, maybe you know the method tally, which you can run on any Ruby collection. It's very helpful because it counts elements inside the collection and returns the element name and the count. With this kind of methods, you always think about the edge cases, like what happens for empty collection. In this case, it returns just an empty hash. But a very cool feature in the newest Rubies is that you can put a parameter into this method. So in this case, tally will again count elements in this original collection it was executed on, but it will add elements from the second collection. So it might be very helpful if you want to add elements from different collections and sum them. And if you really want, you can even call tally method on hash, which will give you a weird result, but again, it will give you a key, which in this case will be a pair of key and value from hash, and the count how many times it was present in the collection. Also, we have many methods which are helpful to assess or, well, to compare different elements inside collection. We have method all, which checks if all items inside collection pass some condition. So obviously, if they all pass, it returns true, but what happens for empty collection? It also returns true. The opposite method that we have none, which checks opposite fact. So if there is not a single one item in a collection that passes the condition block, it will return true. And again, it might be a little confusing, but for empty collection, it also returns true. And we have method any to check if at least one element passes the condition. If it's true, well, it returns true. For empty collection, it returns false. And we even, I just learned, we even have a method one, which checks if there is exactly one element in the collection that passes a condition. But in Ruby and in enumerable module, we have lots of methods which are helpful to split collection. We have a chunk method, quite a complex one, that is used to pass a condition and then split a collection based on the result of the condition. And it does it consecutively. So if one argument passes it, it creates a group, and then it slices the collection when there is next element which does not pass it, and again and again. We can also slice collections not based on on some condition, but based on the size. For example, we have each slice, which means we want to slice our collection into pieces of 2 elements. But remember about edge cases. What happens if your collection cannot be evenly sliced? Well, you will get, as the last element, can have a different size of the output. So be aware, this might be a reason for bugs in your code if you forget about this edge case. And we have another method used to split our connection into smaller parts. We have slice before, which slices the collection when it finds the match, and it searches for another occurrence and then slices it before it's found. Don't confuse it with slice after, which works almost the same way, but makes the slice after the result was found. And one of the most complex methods, if you want to slice the collection, slice when. this is a hard one because it compares elements one by one, and based on the result of the condition on those two elements, it splits the collection. So, for example, in this case, it compares 1 and 2, and then 2 and 4. If the condition is not met, it slices the collection. But we are not only splitting collections in Ruby, we are also joining some collections. So very helpful method that we have is zip, which simply adds element from one collection and joins it with elements from the second collection, like in the example. But again, you might think about edge cases. What happens if the first collection is shorter? Well, you can remember that the first collection has always priority. So if it had just 2 elements, in a result output, you will have just 2 elements. Other elements from this right collection will be ignored. But we can have another edge case. What if the original collection is longer than the second one? Well, again, this first collection have priority. We will get all the elements from the first collection, and empty values will be filled with nils. And there is much more topics, interesting topics about Ruby. For example, the inheritance of exception classes, or how to use lazy enumerator. Maybe that will be a good topic for my talk for next Baltic Ruby. Yeah, before we finish, I want to tell you more about the exam, because I started with exam story. And if you want, and if you are wondering if it's worth to take the exam, you can read the blog post on the Visuality page that describes the exam, how it looks like. But if you are not into this kind of stuff, I really highly recommend you to check out the preparation test. Because you don't have to go for the exam, but the test really shows some areas of Ruby which are often skipped by us when we work on Ruby on Rails applications. So yeah, maybe take a look at it. By the way, the exam has 2 levels, silver and gold. So start with the silver one, which covers basics of Ruby. Still not the easiest one, but it's basics of Ruby. And if you like challenges, take a look at the gold examination. This is a hard one because it's meta-programming and more complex stuff. So if you want some links from my presentation, go to this link. There is a PDF version of this presentation, and that would be it. Thank you.